For centuries, our ancestors didn't just tell stories about fairies. They believed in them. This wasn't some fantasy. It came from experience, from weird things happening at the edge of town, from fortunes changing overnight, and from that creepy feeling of being watched in the woods. They called them the good people, the fair folk, the gentry, nicknames born out of fear, not love. They knew that saying their real name was like inviting them over, and you did not want their attention. These beings weren't the tiny sprites from modern cartoons. They were the city of Irish lore, a powerful otherworldly race forced to live in the hidden spots of our world, inside hills, under the ground, and just across a veil from our reality. They were seen as powerful, unpredictable, and very easily offended. So the folklore that survived isn't just a bunch of charming myths. It's a rulebook for survival, a list of warnings passed down for generations, showing exactly what happens when you break the rules. Today we're peeling back the glitter to look at the stark, unsettling truth. We'll explore the ancient lore and the disturbing modern sightings that serve as a clear warning. Fairies live among us, and you must never ever disrespect them. Of all the threats people whispered about, none is more horrifying than the changeling. The idea is simple. The Fays want human children. They might sneak in and steal a baby from its crib, or even a new mother, and leave a substitute behind, a sickly fairy elder, a piece of enchanted wood, or one of their own. But why? What was the point of this cruel switch? The old stories give a few explanations, each one more chilling than the last. Some say the Fae needed human blood to keep their own lineage from weakening. Others claim human mothers were taken to the other world to be wet nurses for fairy babies. A more sinister theory, found in some old Scottish ballads, suggests the Fae had to pay a tithe to hell every 7 years, and a stolen human child was the perfect payment. Whatever the reason, for the human family, the result was always heartbreak. A family would notice a terrifying change. Their happy, healthy baby would turn sullen, sick, and look strangely old. The changeling might have a crazy appetite, eating the family out of house and home, but staying rail thin. It might show a disturbing intelligence, talking like a cunning old man, or have something physically wrong, like long teeth or a sudden beard. This thing, wearing their child's face, was a parasite, and its arrival brought nothing but bad luck. Irish folklore is full of tales meant to warn parents. They were told to never praise their child's beauty too loudly, or they might attract the Fae's envy. Charms were a must. A piece of iron, like scissors or fireplace tongs, hung over a crib, was a powerful shield. Since the Fae are said to hate iron, throwing a father's coat over a sleeping baby was another common trick. But what if the worst already happened? What if a family was sure they had a changeling? The methods for getting rid of it were brutal. One famous trick was to brew beer in an eggshell. The sight was so ridiculous, it was supposed to shock the changeling into talking, revealing its ancient nature by yelling something like, "I've seen the acorn before the oak, but I've never seen beer brewed in an eggshell." Once it was exposed, it might just bolt up the chimney. Even more terrifying, other methods involved threatening it with violence, especially fire. The belief was that fairies feared fire more than anything, so threatening the changeling with a hot poker or putting it on the hearth would force its fairy family to come and swap the children back. It's a horrifying thought, but it shows just how terrified these families were. This belief had tragic real-world consequences. The most famous case is Bridget Cleary in 1895 Ireland. When Bridget, a young woman, got sick with what was probably pneumonia, her behavior became strange. Her husband and family became convinced she'd been taken by fairies, and a changeling was left in her place. In their frantic attempts to drive the fairy out, they tortured and burned her to death. Her husband's defense wasn't that he was a monster, it was that he truly believed he was fighting a supernatural creature to get his real wife back. While we can look back on this with modern science and call it a tragic misunderstanding of illness, the fear was real. Some scholars think changeling lore was how societies explained childhood disabilities, neurodivergence, or sudden illnesses they didn't understand. It was a story to make sense of something that made no sense, a child who suddenly seemed different. But back then, the changeling wasn't a metaphor, it was a real and present danger, a warning against envy, and a reminder that the most precious things could be stolen in an instant. The warnings from the Fae aren't just about how we act, they're carved into the land itself. Across Ireland and other Celtic lands, there are places that belong to them, places where our world is thin and their world bleeds through. These are the fairy forts, the lone hawthorn trees, and the mushroom rings. To mess with them is to invite disaster. Fairy forts or raths are the circular mounds you can see all over the Irish countryside. Archaeologists know they're the remains of ancient homes, built by farmers thousands of years ago. But as centuries passed, people forgot what they were for, and a new belief grew. These were the homes of the seed, entrances to the other world, and you were not supposed to touch them. This isn't some forgotten superstition. It's still surprisingly powerful today. Farmers will plow huge fields, but leave a gnarled, untouched patch of land in the middle, working around the fort, even if it costs them time and money. To them, it's not superstition, it's common sense. Cutting the brush, moving the stones, or leveling the ground is a huge act of disrespect. The stories about what happens when you do are countless and consistent. One farmer in County Kerry, who ploughed over a fairy mound, found his cattle getting sick and his crops failing. Another story tells of a man who hired workers to level a fort and dropped dead on the spot. The message is always the same: this land is not yours. Perhaps the most famous modern legend about this involves the DeLorean Motor Company. The story goes that in the early 1980s, when they were building their factory near Belfast, the plans went right through a fairy thorn tree, a lone hawthorn, which is a sacred tree in Irish tradition. The local workers who grew up with these stories were seriously spooked. After a string of weird setbacks and a general feeling of dread, the plans were allegedly redrawn to spare the tree. And when the DeLorean company later went bankrupt, some locals just nodded, saying that even almost disrespecting the gentry was enough to seal its fate. A similar story is told about Irish billionaire Sean Quinn, whose empire fell apart after he moved an ancient tomb to expand a quarry. These places are gateways, and trespassing is more than just bad luck. Fairy rings, those perfect circles of mushrooms that appear overnight, are another kind of portal. They look innocent, but folklore warns they're where fairies dance on moonless nights. Step inside, and you're at their mercy. Legends from all over Europe tell of people who heard beautiful music from a ring, stepped in to dance, and had a great time for what felt like an hour. But when they stepped out, they found that decades, or even centuries, had passed. Their friends and family were long dead. Others weren't so lucky, and were said to have danced until they literally crumbled to dust. These aren't just spots on a map, they're thresholds. They are the territory of a powerful and foreign kingdom. The folklore is a clear warning: don't build on their homes, don't cut down their trees, and don't step into their circles. Your world has its rules, and their land must be respected. If you're unlucky, or maybe just foolish enough, to meet one of the fair folk, you're playing a whole new, even more dangerous game. The warnings here aren't about places, but about etiquette. Talking with the fair is like walking through a minefield of unwritten rules, where one wrong word can lead to madness, eternal servitude, or worse. First and most importantly, be polite, but never say thank you. To us, it's just good manners. To the fair, it's an admission of debt. Saying thank you for a gift means you now owe them, and they will collect whenever and however they want, and the payment is never equal. A piece of bread from them might cost you your best cow, your luck for 7 years, or your firstborn child. Instead, you're supposed to say something like, "You are very kind." It acknowledges the gift without trapping you in a contract. Second, names are power. Never, ever give them your real name. Your name is a link to your soul. Giving it away gives them power over you, to summon you, bind you, control you. By the same token, don't ask for their name. If they were to reveal it, you would have power over them, and that's an offense so great, they'd probably strike you blind or dead before you could use it. Refer to them with respect. The good neighbors, the fair folk, the gentry. It shows you know the rules. Third, never accept their food or drink. This is one of the oldest warnings. To eat the food of the other world is to bind yourself to it forever. You can never go home. This is the story of Thomas the Rhymer, a Scottish poet from the 13th century. He met the Queen of Elfland, who took him to her realm. She offered him an apple, but warned him that if he ate it, he could never leave. Thomas was smart enough to refuse. For his wisdom, the Queen gave him the gift of prophecy, but forced him to serve her for 7 years. He returned to our world, unable to tell a lie, and after his 7 years were up, he was called back to the fairy realm and never seen again. His story is a warning. Even when you follow the rules, a deal with the Fae is a dangerous one. Finally, a promise is a promise. The Fae might talk in riddles, but they are bound by their word and can't tell a direct lie. Because of this, they take promises very seriously. If you make a promise to one of them, you have to keep it, no matter what. To break your word is the worst insult, and their revenge will be swift and awful. These rules show you're dealing with beings who have a moral code that is totally alien to ours. They don't operate on goodwill, but on a complex system of power, debt, and contracts. The warnings are clear: be polite, be careful, accept nothing, and promise nothing. Your soul could be the price of a single slip-up. It's easy to write all of this off, isn't it? It's just superstition from a time before science. The changeling was a way to explain disease. The fairy forts were respected out of a simple fear of the unknown. If that were the case, the stories should have died. As science advanced and we mapped the whole world, belief in this hidden realm should have faded away. But it hasn't, not really. What if these tales weren't just stories? What if they were field notes, eyewitness accounts passed down for generations? If they were just legends, why do modern encounters reported by normal people from all over the world sound so eerily similar to these ancient warnings? We might use different words now: aliens, interdimensional beings, but the experiences are hauntingly familiar. People still get lost and experience strange time slips. They still meet beings that operate on an alien logic. They still feel that heavy sense of being somewhere they are not welcome. What if the warnings were never meant to expire? In an age of smartphones and satellites, a fairy encounter sounds ridiculous. Yet, people keep reporting experiences that can't be easily explained, and they often share them with a sense of total confusion and fear. The Modern Fairy Sightings podcast, for example, is basically a digital archive of these strange events, filled with stories from people who feel they've brushed up against something ancient. The most striking part is how these modern stories feel like a direct continuation of the old folklore. These are not tales about Tinkerbell. They are weird, unsettling, and carry the same warnings. Take an account from a hiker in Sedona, Arizona. The hiker was on a familiar trail and saw a man on a bridge who just seemed wrong. His features were slightly off, his presence deeply unsettling. The hiker felt a primal fear and rushed past. Thinking about it later, they realized that during that brief moment, time itself felt distorted, like the world was slowing down and becoming unreal. That sounds a lot like the ancient tales of time slips and beings who can mess with our perception of reality. Another story comes from a man named Sion in northwest Wales. He shared a lifetime of experiences, including seeing a circle of white glowing beings appear and then vanish in a field, a modern-day fairy ring. He also described a terrifying event where an invisible force attacked him at a crossroads, a type of place often linked to the supernatural in folklore. He wasn't describing winged sprites, he was describing a frightening, menacing encounter that reinforces the idea that these beings are not friendly. Then you have stories that feel like the Fae are still up to their old tricks. In Sheffield, England, a witness reported seeing small entities in hedges and homes that would move objects and create the feeling of being watched. This is just like the household spirits from folklore, the brownies or pixies, who could be helpful if you were respectful, but would become malicious tricksters if you offended them. The key detail, just like in the old tales, is that feeling of a territorial presence that demands respect. Perhaps one of the most powerful parallels comes from a story told by a man named Rod, sharing tales from his Native American tradition. He spoke of talking animals, shape-shifting beings, and the horrifying experience of his cousin being pulled into a creek by an unseen force. The names and cultural details are different, but the themes are identical: powerful nature spirits, shapeshifters, and the danger of wild sacred places. It's a powerful reminder that these beliefs aren't just Celtic, they are a near-universal human experience. What ties all these modern accounts together is a shared sense of the uncanny. Witnesses struggle to describe what they saw, saying things like, "It just felt wrong," or "It wasn't natural." They talk about a strange silence falling, the air getting heavy, and an intense feeling of being watched by an intelligence that wasn't human. Many are afraid to even share their stories for fear of being ridiculed, a modern taboo that's not so different from the old fear of speaking the Fae's name. We started by pulling back the curtain on the comforting modern lie of the fairy. Underneath, we found something much older, wilder, and more dangerous. We found the warnings of our ancestors, a whole system of belief, born from a deep, fearful respect for a world that existed right alongside theirs. We've looked at the old tales not as fables, but as a survival guide. We heard the warning against envy in the horrifying lore of the changeling. We saw the warning against trespass carved into the land itself, in sacred forts and dangerous rings that people, even today, are afraid to disturb. We unraveled the treacherous rules of talking to them, a social contract where one wrong word could cost you everything. These tales paint a consistent and unsettling picture. The fairy of folklore aren't fun-loving sprites. They are a proud, powerful, and territorial race with an alien morality, capable of both strange kindness and terrifying revenge. They are the gentry, the good neighbors, being so powerful our ancestors were afraid to even say their names, and just when we're tempted to write it all off as superstition, we hear the echoes. The modern sightings reported today aren't exact copies of the old stories, but they share the same fundamental truths. The reports of missing time, of strange beings in lonely places, of the overwhelming feeling of an unseen presence, they tell us that the veil between worlds hasn't gotten any thicker. The warnings haven't expired. Perhaps the biggest warning of all is about humility. The folklore of the Fae reminds us that we are not the masters of this world. It asks us to walk a little more carefully, to look at the wild places with a bit more wonder, and to accept that there are forces far older and maybe far more powerful than we are. Whether you believe in them as real beings or as symbols of the unknown, the message is the same. Tread carefully, be respectful, and listen to the stories, because they were never meant to be fairy tales. They were, and they still are, a warning. This kind of folklore isn't just a global thing, it's intensely local. Almost every town, every forest, every old hill has its own stories. What are the fairy tales from your area? What are the places that people know not to mess with? Share them in the comments below. Let's build a library of these warnings together.